series of occasional talks and presentations that at the AMBO we have scheduled. We call these Drinks and Disruption. The idea is to create little network events, social and educational, on topics related to creative entrepreneurship. The old ambulance station has its provenance in creative industries and the arts, and we have evolved now to build a business, to begin building a business that we would call a social enterprise, whose currency is creativity. So this is the arts and the cultural and creative industries, but also creative science, creative activism, creative business. The generic value of creativity in our community. And this is a fairly new way of framing this sort of public space. And there's cultural change that's going on where many people still expect this to operate as a sort of heavily government dependent deployer confetti machine of government largesse. In contrast to that, we are building it as an enterprise. And it's very important, a not-for-profit enterprise, but also a not-for-loss enterprise. It's very important in that effort to bring our community along with us as a board, not just to have all these highfalutin ideas, because we'll leave, in our experience, the artists, the creatives, and the community sector behind. We're talking about amalgamating what the arts, cultural industries are, what the community sector is, and what business is. So in that effort, we've created networks, and one of the early and most fruitful networks has been with the University of Sunshine Coast and the School of Business in particular, and precisely Dr. Viller Scheepers, who has an interest and expertise in the matter of entrepreneurship. So it directly relates to the brief that I just described to you for us. And I've been privileged to find myself on similar sides of the table, of various tables with Retha, related to projects around the current Advancing Regional Innovation Program on the Sunshine Coast, which is a council-driven initiative funded by the Advance Queensland, the state government, to build the innovative ecology on the Sunshine Coast. And as part of that, that body has commissioned research from Retha and her colleagues, a range of colleagues, into benchmarking innovation in a regional context. How do we know that innovation is going on? And if innovation is going on, how do we measure how it's going on? It's sufficient to be able to compare it to where innovation is going on in other regions of the state, for example. How do we find metrics for this? This is a scholarly pursuit, and it's entirely appropriate that Retha is engaged in a research project as part of that. So this isn't about that, as far as I understand it. It's about Rita's work that's happened, that's brought her to this point, and which I think personally is a very compelling idea of understanding, of finding ways in to how to understand innovation in our region. So thank you for your attention. May I introduce Dr. Viller Scheepers.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It's always, on the sunny coast we're kind of spoiled with sunshine, so it's really hard for us to get out in winter and to put on long sleeves. And I don't see any shorts around, so you must be pretty cold. Here and there a bare arm that will brave it, but you're probably from down south, aren't you? So thank you all for coming out to the Old Amber. Thank you very much, Michael, for inviting me. And there's a lot of people here who are part of the Old Ambo team, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to put on drinks, to record this session, to get you booked in, to spread the word of what's happening here tonight. So all of you, thank you very much, because this just won't happen without it. And then thank you for coming. So I'm really excited tonight to share with you some of the work that we've been doing. Like Michael said, I'm based at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I love entrepreneurship in the sense that I guess I got married to someone who was an entrepreneur and now is entrepreneurial, but not an entrepreneur as such. I kind of hang out with entrepreneurs because I think they're really cool, and I do what I can to support all of those efforts where I can. So, and if you ask me, have I done it? I've probably miserably failed at it. And so I kind of really admire what entrepreneurs do, and I'm trying to understand it. So this work that I like to share with you tonight is based on a research project that we've done in collaboration with the Sunshine Coast Council. So it's part of a collaboration grant and happened in 2016 and 2017. And instead of presenting you with some hard numbers and things in spirit with the old Ambo and the creative stuff, we're presenting you with pictures tonight. And the pictures are all around personas. And how do we understand the people actually around us? Because when you look around, I think you can appreciate that there is no one kind of entrepreneur. Often we hear the story about entrepreneurs and they kind of, the Silicon Valley started in the garage, grunging it out, sold the company, like exit, IPO. And really that's probably not the reality that most people experience. And when you start to talk to entrepreneurs and you try and pin them in a box, you realize that's pretty hard to do. People are so different. So our approach in using personas is trying to understand people holistically, not from a council perspective where you're trying to say, oh, well, we want to support high growth businesses. Because essentially businesses are created about people create businesses. So unless you understand the person and what drives them and why they're doing it and why do they make the choices they do, you don't really have a chance to design any kind of intervention to help them, because you're missing the life of what they're trying to create. So this is our attempt to bring that to the fore. My colleague Erica Mealy is actually the user interface designer and has worked on a lot of IT solutions, so it's her work and her artistry which you see displayed. I guess I've kind of I've added the words and the like little, if you see bits and bobs like stages, that's me, and scales. She's the creative person who's put all the people that we've spoken to in focus groups and interviews, map them into these different personas. And then Anne Lawrence from the council, who's been an entrepreneur herself, has also been involved in this project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is a persona and why you might be interested to use it. And before I do that, let me just get a sense of who of you are in this business of starting a business or owning a business yourselves. Oh, right. Who of you help entrepreneurs? Okay. So let me just get a feeling, who in the room was born on the Sunshine Coast? Oh, that's really good, guys. It's like I'm at the university and I work with many people, and when I ask this question, I'm like happy if I get 3 people. So this is a pretty good turnout. So of those not born on the Sunshine Coast, people born in Queensland, right? People born in non-Queensland states, people born in other countries, right? Should I raise my hand? Yes, it's not an Australian accent, it's not even a Dutch accent, it's a South African accent, so there you go. Been around since 2010 and just never found the heart to move anywhere else. It's a pretty cool place. It's such a great community to be part of. So I'm hoping my work makes a difference in this community, and that's what I love about this community, is that it's a growing place, it's a vibrant place, it's a place where you put your heart into something, you can actually make a difference to the community. So I think it's a really cool space to be in. And this idea of personas, we now try and think of entrepreneurs not simply as individuals who are like the Lone Ranger, you know, on his horse. We actually realize that we're a network of connected people who are all trying to do things and might be doing our own thing, but we might be doing some things together, or we might actually be helping each other. So we think more of entrepreneurship in a network approach, and that's when Michael was talking about the ecology. We think of entrepreneurs almost as an ecosystem. So we might have some people in the room who turn out to be a Silicon Valley type, but we might have people in the room who are just doing their own business. We have people who are doing stuff part-time. We have people who are like happy to just employ 2-3 people. So we have many different types of people in the room, and the ecosystem approach recognizes that that's what actually makes entrepreneurs. It's a whole heap of different types of people, and we need all of them. We can't just be having like the businesses that want to grow so fast that they end up moving to San Francisco, and guess what? Then there's nobody left on the coast. So we need all sorts. So that's the ecosystem approach. I'm going to talk about different types of personas, and then I'm sort of going to ask you the question what it means to you and what are your takeaways for this. So if we talk about personas, I was trying to explain to somebody before, what is this? It's not doing a personality testing. It's kind of like, think about a role that you might assume, or an avatar that you might identify into that. So you might step into this role at a certain point in time. So you might be running a part-time business at a certain point in time, and then you think, am I going to make a full-time go of this or not? And then you say yes, and then you actually take on another persona once you kind of step into a full-time role. So personas are like roles that you might take on, and this role has this kind of face and this kind of motivations and different stages that they're involved in. So it's not a stereotype, but it's a simplified way to think about the people around us that we interact with. So if you are entrepreneurs yourselves, you can think of your customers as having different personas, right? So one customer might be quite demanding and require a lot of your time, and maybe they are also a high value customer, so you might spend a lot of time with them. But another customer might require a light touch and just kind of want to know the good stuff, but they might not be such a heavy user or a buyer of your products or services. So you as entrepreneurs also have different kind of customers who you can think of as people. And thinking of them as people means a whole lot easier to talk to them. Because as you know, we don't talk to all of our friends or people that we know in the same way. You change and adapt your message slightly. Let's say if you're talking to somebody you know socially, then somebody that might be in the same line of work as you are, or somebody that might be your supplier, if you think about it like that. So we can change our conversations if we can think about our customers as people. And if your business is growing and you've got a lot of customers, or you perhaps have an online business, then it's harder to get close to the kind of person. So you might have to work a bit harder. If you're seeing the people face to face, then you might actually go, yeah, I know. You know, like the guy is handyman doing that, and the guy who's going to buy stuff to get someone else to fix the stuff in his house, whatever that might be. But there are, you can put a human face or a personality around some of your customers. So I can go into the method in which we did this, but I'll talk about it in the end if you've got questions about that. So let me just say that we conducted lots of interviews, and we asked a lot of entrepreneurs to come to focus groups. So we conducted about 12 focus groups with business at different stages across the coast in 2016, and I'm very, very grateful to people who were part of that, because without their input this would not have come about. And out of that we said, well, actually we can identify 14 different types of people in this whole ecosystem. 2 of them are support personas. They may not be entrepreneurs specifically, but the other 12 around are all different types. And they can be, the 12 types can go into 5 different groups. The main thing to realize, like I said before, is you can move. You don't kind of stay just in one persona. You might start off as a part-timer, then go full-time, then decide to grow your business. These are all, you can take on different personas over your journey. If you haven't seen this before, there is a ecosystems map out there of the Sunshine Coast, which if you Google Sunshine Coast Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, it's on Digital Sunshine Coast and also on Council's website. And what it does, it says that there are certain things like advocacy, events, co-working spaces, incubators, funding that connects people in different ways. So if you're new to the coast and you don't know this, then maybe that's kind of like a starting point if you're trying to see what's going on. You know, and it looks, the Sunshine Coast looks very different to Brisbane, or perhaps if you've been in Sydney or Melbourne, then that's like, this place looks quite different and it looks like there's nothing going on, but actually there's heaps going on. So how do you find out about it? This is one spot which you can sort of have a look at what's happening. And we base our personas of this idea of a system. So we're not just looking at entrepreneurs that exist, we're looking at all people that play a role in this bigger system. So I'll just run through this quickly. The idea of a system, if you look at entrepreneurs as a system, you may have some mentors or lead entrepreneurs who are quite experienced, who might bring expertise from elsewhere, might have sold a few businesses, or might just be running a stable business for over 40 years or 30 years, whatever that might be. But they often play a lead or a mentoring kind of role. Then we've got the actual kind of people starting and growing businesses in the middle. Surrounds them is universities, TAFEs, educational institutions that's supposed to provide some skills or potentially knowledge that entrepreneurs can commercialize. There's sort of the networking type spaces like the old AMBO, who play an incubator, accelerator role, or co-working spaces. Play into that. There are other people, like people who provide social media marketing expertise, perhaps some finance providers and things like that. And then we've got financial capital investors. And then, as we all know, we're all looking for faster internet, looking for good roads, looking for good public transport, some of the infrastructure stuff that just make things work. And hopefully when, you know, we're sort of looking forward to that time when we don't have to spend, what is it, 1.5 to 2 hours to the airport to get out of the country, that we can actually just drive up to our own airport and we'll be able to fly kind of early in the morning to other places and come back at a reasonable time, business hours. That would be awesome, right? So these are all the different things that entrepreneurs need to make their businesses grow and thrive. So in all the 14 different personas, we've identified people who are sort of in the support central space. So potentially the old AMBO being a privately run social enterprise, who might fall into this services SAM type of persona. Or from the government side, you know, Council or Regional Development Australia may put on some programs and so on. So they're really in that part in the middle where they try and provide support services. Then in terms of other personas, we get people who are up in this top box, highly experienced leaders. And I'll go into the different types now. I'll just give you the 3 types. One might be what we call been there Bobby. So that would be someone who's sort of probably been on the coast for a long time, maybe has 20 years of business experience, possibly runs a family business, and really stable type of business. Doesn't necessarily want to grow, but has got a lot of business experience over time and potentially can transition this to the next phase or sell out, but can provide a lot of help and mentoring to other people around. Then we've got opportunity Olivia or Oliver. This is somebody who's also probably highly experienced, may have run their own businesses, or they may just have worked in, kind of in a corporate environment, looking to get involved, and may that involved in new business development. So they may have already have a bit of money they've put aside, and they might want to kind of invest or work with people with ideas. They've got the business expertise, not necessarily the idea for the new thing, but they can kind of, to somebody who wants to do a technical thing, bring that business expertise in. They're looking for business opportunities, therefore the name Opportunity, Olivia and Oliver. Then the serial Sydney, which it comes not from serial killer, but from serial entrepreneur. Right, so people who just can't stop themselves. They're always trying to create a new business. They, you know, you'll find them around the coast. They're probably people who've worked outside of the country. They've probably sold off some businesses. They are always kind of wild and wacky type of ideas. The people who walk around the place and talk about AI and, you know, how the robots, so how we can become part robots, and I don't know, all that kind of crazy stuff. And guess what? They're talking to other people in other parts of the world who believe them. It's kind of like, I guess, the Elon Musks of the world, right? Yeah, we'll send you to space. Who's ready to go and live on Mars? Raise your hands. Well, I'm pretty happy where I am. Oh, look, we've got some takers there. So that kind of a person is around, and they can fulfill a mentoring role. So they hear, sometimes they become part of Support Central, because they might become an entrepreneur in residence, and they might mentor some businesses, and if these businesses have got growth potential, they might come in as an investor and really try and scale up, but they gear towards global growth type businesses. Then we've got some younger people on this side, which is sort of like our growth-focused individuals. Entrepreneurial Evan or Ava, maybe you've seen them around. They've always got heaps of ideas. They're like doing this project, but then they get bored, and then they kind of sell that off, and then they're on to the next thing, and they're kind of really jumping between different ideas. And then we've got the niche Nicola or Nick. Niche Nicola or Nick are based on the Sunshine Coast. They may have small businesses, but they're actually selling overseas, often through online means, and they've kind of developed a specific market niche, and they might have grown it locally, or they might have put something online and that's just started to sell from the beginning in overseas markets. So we don't see them necessarily as very flashy business people, but they're actually running an international business from the coast. And if any of you joined the SCRIPT or Sunshine Coast Regional Innovation Program that was out at the golf course a while back, I think the Chris, who's running the Perigian, was talking about a few people like that around in the Noosa area, like that. So those people form part of the ecosystem. Then on this side, we've got people who are economically active, but they're not interested in growing their businesses. And a lot of people in the coast are actually in that space. They're pretty happy, they're looking for a good lifestyle, but they don't necessarily want employees. And they may be highly specialized, have expertise themselves, people like architects and graphic designers and people, I guess, content creators these days around the social media space. And those people are sort of fall into the independent Ida or Ivan box. They're happy to subcontract with other businesses, but they themselves don't want to grow. They just don't want to have that responsibility of going through all the contractual stuff of working with employees. Then there's a few other people in this space. One is Side Hustle Steve or Stevie. So that is just somebody, you know, they like always got this business on the side. They do actually have a full-time job, and they're kind of always in two minds. Are they going to go for this thing they're doing on the side? If it grows big enough, then they'll leave their job. But if not, you know, they'll kind of keep the full-time job. And that's actually how many of us start in entrepreneurial activities, because you just don't have enough money to kind of go for that full throttle from the beginning. So you try and do something to pay the bills, and you do your side thing. And I actually know a few people who are kind of working weekends and doing casual work, so that in the week they can kind of work on their own startups. And so that is a big thing that often actually goes unrecognized. Then we've got part-time Paddy or Patrick. Now, part-time Paddy or Patrick is kind of in two minds if they ever want to do this full-time. They just kind of got a business on the side, but they're always going to be doing that part-time. They've got other things that they're doing, either lifestyle reasons, or they just want to have a business, let's say for 6 months of the year, the rest of the 6 months they're traveling and so on. So they're not going to commit to it full-time. And then we've got passionate Paul or Paula, which is probably people in the social enterprise space. They really care about what they're doing. They have a real heart for it. They're not in it to make a big profit or anything, but they really care about what they're doing because they believe they can make a change in the world in terms of that mission that concerns them. So, but they're also not necessarily focused on aggressive growth. They're happy to have things move along. So what I can say is that you can see that passionate Paula Paul could move to niche Nicola or Nick once they've got their businesses established enough. And then I just want to highlight this that was really quite key for us when we did this research. As you know, the Sunshine Coast is growing rapidly. In fact, we kind of get told by the Bernard Salts of this world that it's the entrepreneurial capital. Decide how you feel about that. It is also, in terms of growth projections, we're sort of at 280,000 heading up to 300,000 people, projected to go to 500,000 people in 10, 15 years. So, and if you're going around to these type of events, it's amazing how many, like every time I go and I hang out with a lot of this stuff, I meet new people. And they're often people who kind of just come here for a little bit, or they've actually quite recent arrivals, and me being an immigrant myself kind of pick up on a little bit of that from that side of the community. So here we've got 3 types of people who are new to the Sunshine Coast, people who don't know what's going on. Those who are, I think what happens in a regional place like this, if you're part of the community, you kind of always hear about things that's going on. You don't even have to watch social media because you know someone who'll go, oh, you're going along to that? Yeah, I'm coming, you know. But if you're outside of that, you may not even see this stuff because you don't know the people, and it might not even come up in your feed because you might not have changed your location on Facebook yet or whatever. So here we've got 3 groups. People who are immigrants, better living Benito or Benito. They might have left things in their home country. They might have made come with some money, like on a business visa, and they have to settle in a regional area. They choose the Sunshine Coast. Or they might come with very little means and they're trying to get a better life here. They gave up everything they had. Maybe they had quite a lot of high standing or status in their home country, and they like come over here and nobody knows them, and all the networks, all the expertise they had doesn't matter at all. And that's kind of we've labeled one of the quotes we got from people in that, who sort of that persona said, from hero to zero in one flight, which kind of encapsulates that idea. Then we get people who might be seeking a better lifestyle. So they might have been working crazy hours or working internationally, and then when they get a family, they're kind of coming to the Sunshine Coast because they now kind of want to have a better life. So the lifestyle Larry or Larissa might already have a business in another area, like they may have a business in Melbourne, Sydney, or even New Zealand, and they're coming to the coast for the lifestyle reasons, but they might still be traveling in and out, or appointing managers and remotely manage the businesses they already have. And then new to the area Nat is in that same boat, in the sense that they don't really know what's going on, they don't know where to find help, they're probably more of a novice than the lifestyle Larry or Larissa who already have a family. So that's the whole kind of all the different types. And I think one of the key things about personas is it really highlights this fact that a lot of the talk around entrepreneurship is here But the whole system, if we take a systems view, is a whole lot bigger than that. And that's one of the key things that I think this really showcases, that it's fine to just have people who just want to be their own person, self-employed, with expertise to subcontract and do project work. And people who are actually doing stuff on the side. And people who are new to the area. And people who are quite experienced. And it actually takes all sorts, the whole network, to make a thriving business ecosystem, and not just one type. So the idea of these personas is that people can actually move around. Like I said before, you know, you might start out as a part-time Paddy, then move to a side hustle Stevie, and then decide to become, you know, like, or I'm going more mainstream, I'm now got an independent Ida or Ivan, and then like I actually want to grow my business and kind of move to a been there Bobby type of thing. So you're not stuck in one persona. So wherever you feel you might be tonight, you're not stuck in that. People who are new to the area don't remain new to the area forever, right? They kind of come in as a certain persona, but then they get to know people and then they move to another persona. So all this diagram really illustrates is that it's dynamic. We have to be careful to see the world like this is the way it's now and it's always going to be that way. It's dynamic, it's changing. Somebody that you meet that were doing something on the side last time you saw them might now be having more customers, might be kind of going more professional, might now be employing some part-time people who then turn into full-time people and so on. So there's constant dynamism. Of course, the other thing is people who have a business sell out of a business, and actually that's great because they can then help others move through the process or assist in mentoring. I was lucky enough to be in Adelaide a couple of weeks ago with an entrepreneurship ecosystems conference, and the one guy from Glasgow that was there called this entrepreneurial recycling. He said, you know, sometimes we just think of that big sellout event and people have sold out and they've sold out of jobs and local businesses, but you don't think how it frees up kind of money and talent if people do sell out of their businesses, that they then have to help others and kind of invest in the local ecosystem because they care about the region. So around the place we've got the different personas that are stuck up that you can see, and I'm just going to, given the time we have, talk about what's depicted on a persona. If you, so I won't, you can sort of pick yourself out of the lineup after I've given the formal talk. I know it's pretty hard to sit down and listen to people after you've had a full day's work, so don't want to keep you too long, but I'll just tell you how we make up these personas, because you might want to be making up these personas for your own customers. So from that perspective, maybe you can say, well, how can I apply this for myself? Who would be the personas I'm actually dealing with in terms of my customers? Instead of just going, oh, it's people who are from 18 to 35, you know, who kind of go onto Facebook on Mondays and Fridays and actually not really know them, not having a conversation with them in terms of people. So when we draw up a persona, we try and give them a nice funky name, and we try and get one quote that captures the essence of what they're trying to do. So in this niche Nicola, she's saying, we're all in it together, so though my business is different to yours, let's catch up. So this type of persona is keen on networking with other business owners because they're independent on their own, running an online business, so they really have that need for a social connection. Then a persona usually has a bit of a descriptive text around who that is. So in niche Nicola, they are networkers extraordinaire. So if you meet them, they'll often be able to introduce you to people you want to know. They they've got like a boutique market offering in the niche market offering, and their customers aren't just local in the Sunshine Coast area. So they're actually often bringing in dollars from outside the area. That's, I guess, why people who support entrepreneurs and economic development should be interested in them. They have a local focus, and they're often open and willing to chat to other entrepreneurs and business owners. They're often quite collaborative in their approach. So in this case, that's probably what you'd find normally on personas. You'd sort of find a nice funky name that you can get your head around, a nice quote if you're talking to them, and a bit of a description of who they are. Then in our case, we added some demographic information, which is probably what you will do with yours as well, right? So we found that this can be either a man or a woman, didn't matter. And they were usually youngish in entrepreneurial terms. They're sort of under 40. They're not necessarily in that mature bracket yet, I guess. What motivates them? They're really passionate about their product and they want to work with a niche customer base. They don't want to be a broad-based type of offering, so they're often quite differentiated products and services. And then in our case, because we were looking at this from a network or an ecosystem place, and what Support Central in that figure could do to support them, we put in this variable of places I'll go for help. So this person has an extensive network, and this will be different for all the different personas, right? So in this case, with network, the ecosystem sees me as an entrepreneur. The reason we put that in is how will these people identify? So if you use the language entrepreneur with them, they'll respond well to that. But if you use the language entrepreneur with an independent Ida or Ivan, they'll actually go, no, it's not me. I'm a business owner. So that's why we've added this dimension. What's the identity of this persona? How do they see themselves? And other people also talked about them as entrepreneurs. So we've got this, how do I see myself? How does the ecosystem see me? And then because we identified that a lot of support is actually provided through events like this, we added this, would the person go to an event or not? So in this case, I'll attend an event always. I might have organized the event myself. So in this part of the persona, we've put in some demographic details, how the person sees themselves, and in our case, we're interested in support. So in your case, you might go, well, what kind of products are they likely to buy? How regularly might they buy those products? Why might they buy them? What motivates them? So we've sort of got our motivation here, but you might go, well, why people buy a product, the actual need they're trying to satisfy is what you're trying to tap into there. I'll give you an example of a business I'm kind of currently working with, who sells their products online. They've realized that they have sort of three market segments. They kind of sell through wholesale, then they want to sell online. They've had a lot of requests, and there's the two sort of market segments, one which buy gifts for others, which their products can be, or people who buy to spoil themselves. So that's clear two different motivations of why people would buy the product, and they need to develop two different personas to capture these different motivations for buying their product. In our case, we said businesses are different. They're not all at the same stage, so we've included a stage of the business. And here we've sort of said, well, how experienced are people? How confident are they? To what extent will they kind of come to spaces like this and help other people, which in this case we were calling altruism. We've changed that now to call ecosystem support and contributor, really. The size of the business here is sort of a mid-size, the scale of the business. And on this side, we said, all right, from a council, economic development, kind of incubator, co-working space, what are the things that they need from the ecosystem? So in your case, you can decide how detailed you want to make this, but really this persona gives much, it's so rich, it can convey a lot of information, and as you go around, you'll see they're on one page. So they're not dead statistics of the sort of things that I guess your Facebook page will tell you, of people going onto your Facebook page. They're like people, because you can see their faces, you can see what they're saying, and you know what drives them to make decisions, and why do they engage with you, and what do they want in that process, and perhaps their aspirations, whatever it is relevant to what you're working on. So on the one hand, I hope that you can identify yourself tonight through the different kind of personas that's here. But on the other hand, I also hope that this shows you an example of what you can do in terms of the type of customers that you might be dealing with around. So in terms of the time, Michael?
You're fine. There's time for questions if you'd like.
All right, so I'm just quickly going to jump to the my kind of closing. Okay, apologize. I'm going to click through things because I think having a conversation is more important than me pushing information. So there's going to be a couple of flashes. Stand by. Okay. So on the one hand, I wanted to talk a little bit about this, of how you can use it. If you are supporting entrepreneurs, I want to say to you, please have a look. This information is freely available. It's out there already. We really want to work with support providers to know how you might be using this and how you might be finding it useful if you are working with other entrepreneurs, and what more we can kind of do around that to say, let's target a specific group. How do they think about these things? So if you're sort of in the I'm supporting other entrepreneurs space, please talk to me and let's see what we should be doing next with this work that we've done so far. Right, so in our case, what we are doing is basically, this is our first concept, so it's like qualitative work. This is our ideas that we've put out there. We have spoken to quite a number of people, but we'd like to validate this a bit more. Get numbers, like how many of these people are on the coast, that kind of idea, or even in other regional ecosystems and so on. So we will be incorporating this qualitative stuff into a survey that we'll probably send out towards the end of August and September. So please, I know surveys might be painful, but it's really, really valuable. Tells us a lot about our local community. So if it comes out and it comes via the AMBO, I ask you very humbly for you to contribute to that, because we're really trying to get an idea of how many people are here. We're also working with other regions so that we can kind of get a comparison. The Sunshine Coast is being seen as a very active, kind of burgeoning region, so our region can be really showcased. Like, you know, the Barossa is known for wine. We could be known for, I know, you decide how we're going to make it up as we go along. All right, so I'm happy to take any questions you might have at this stage, or even comments, ideas. Yeah, over to you.
I have one. And I'll park over here and sort of moderate this, because part of our purpose is to document this for people that can't be here. And I'm wired for sound, so just rather than, apparently we're getting muffled sounds from the audience, so I'll be here to sort of paraphrase, so it's the record, it's not just sort of patronising. The question I'd like to ask is, it strikes me when I look at the tables and the metrics that sit by the side of these avatars, these characters, that this is all automatable, if that's a word. That if I was, say, a local government official, or if I was an investor, I might be able to create an algorithm that allows me to make estimates of the value of an offer that I might want to sell to these people, or the capacity to start of the region to support a new business, which might need some of these people, and I can hit a button, I can hit enter, and get some kind of basic readout that it's potentially a very powerful tool in that sense. Has that come up in your research?
I think it's that really goes into this next stage that we want to do, because this has been developed out of a lot of conversations that we've had. We have documented the conversations and tried to figure out like what are the ways people normally talk about entrepreneurs, and then what are the things that people have told us. So that component of how I see myself and how the ecosystem sees me really came out quite strongly out of the focus group. So some of these things exist already, so yes, we can draw on them, certainly the demographic things and perhaps the stage and the age of the business, but some of this stuff is still a bit, I guess, qualitative. So we're working, the next stage, the validation stage, will help us put more numbers, like, or even if people say this, that kind of feeds into this type of persona. So yeah, it's in the process.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's here and here, then here.
Yeah, my name is Terry, thank you very much. I think that part of the question I have now has been answered, so I'll overlay that if I may. My thought was looking at the results of the survey and your research, and thank you, Retha, it's really cool. You know, from a community aspect, you can see the personas and how our region looks, which is very good. If I look at it from a business perspective, then I can say to myself, these are the areas of interest, business interest. From that perspective, I wonder if there is the possibility of getting how much money, income, finances, as a value component, not taking away the other value components of who they are and what they do, what each grouping represents from a business perspective, so that when we go to councils and when we go to investors and when we go to places who want to apply money here, they can see where they may get greater value for their investment dollar.
So the question is, how might this be used? How might this system, this way of looking at things, be used by public sector or private investors in making decisions about what to support or how to create policy?
What their financial viability is and how much in a percentage way. So if I want to apply money here, I can see that to apply it there would give me a greater return rather than there.
So, how to make nuanced judgments about the value of investments, the value of commitment of resources.
From a financial perspective.
From a financial perspective.
Yeah, so the survey that we will do in, I guess, late August, September, will quantify some of that, because we will add some of the data that we've got here, and that's a innovation survey that's actually done globally, and it asks about the business's performance, in which areas they're innovating, which kind of partners they work with. So we envisage that that will be possible, and that innovation benchmarking that we'll do will be like an annual survey that will run for 3 years, because that will really tell us more about what's happening in real time, like how things are developing. The biggest problem with just doing a one kind of go measure is that you only have a picture of that year, and that may be a bad year. There may have been a flood, maybe a drought, right? So you're only getting that one snapshot. And as you know, if you've ever taken pictures of yourself, or you get these reminders that come up with, this is what you looked 5 years ago, you're like, wow, really? That's so, I'm not sure that I'm the same person anymore. So that idea of this survey over time will help us provide more evidence in that sense, in where that might be potential to invest. Thank you, Terry.
One before you, Ellie, yeah.
As you know, I'm very interested in regional economic growth and sustainability, so I'm kind of, how can we have, or are you looking at how you can map this to go to other regions, particularly remote and rural? Because, and obviously the township itself might not be all that big from an ecosystem, but certainly the outlying areas, and then even how they can connect with each other across other RRR or rural, remote, regional areas, because I think if we can figure that out and actually grow the RRR regional economic system in Australia, there could be some significant change economically in regional areas.
Some questions about, does this provide a model to be used outside the Sunshine Coast, particularly in remote contexts, and can it be used intra-regionally?
Yeah, we like to think that it should be able to be used, but we don't know yet because we haven't tested it. So, right, yes, certainly. Let's talk about that. So we are talking to other regions that are potentially similar to ours, and some of my colleagues are based more north, so we're hoping to get a little bit more data. I think Queensland's a really interesting place because it kind of has this economic activity concentrated in the southeast corner and then a lot more spread out, and that's really a challenge for those other kind of regional areas because they may have some of these things but not others. And if you don't have something in your ecosystem, the question is how do you then get it there? But you need to identify first, right, that it's not there, and how do you kind of shift a negative economic cycle to a positive economic cycle. These are some of the real issues we're grappling with. So yes, let's talk.
Ali,
Thanks very much for your presentation. I have a few thoughts that have bounced around since you've obviously given your presentation. But one of the things I was thinking is, have you actually looked at risk profiling of each of these avatars? Because as I understand it, there's a significant aspect to people's willingness or capacity to endure risk in that early sort of entrepreneurial phase. And the next part of that question is, have you looked at the risk profile of each of these personas as to whether they're going to make it or they're not going to make it in their venture?
Right.
So the question is about risk profile associated with each of the personas, and particularly how that might be used to project or estimate their chances of success.
So the stories we wanted to tell through the personas was really stories, you know, positive stories of what people were looking at and what that they feel themselves comfortable in doing, and not comparing people in, how can I put this, almost in a negative sense. So in that sense, we wanted to say that, you know, if you run an independent business, or if you do something part-time, or if you're trying to grow your business, these are all valid economic objectives. So we didn't want to introduce this is good, this is bad type of in the persona representation. We wanted to present different. So to answer the question around risk, no, we didn't include risk. The second question was?
Whether that you were able to perhaps make some predictions, I suppose, to help people understand, I suppose, their perhaps some limitations in terms of their likelihood of success and things they might need to look at and make adjustments for to improve their chances of success.
All right, so this question, just for people sort of watching online, is around, can we make predictions based on the personas? So it's another, like, I'm not selling this stuff, I'm just being really honest, we don't know yet. We don't have enough data to answer that question. I think there's certainly previous research that has been done that has tried to do that, but you know, even angel investors have, or professional investors have a pretty hard time in picking either the right ideas or the right people, because people change, people can learn things. I was fortunate enough to be on the Silicon Valley trip a couple of years back, and there you find people who are invest in the people that they just lost $800,000. They'll invest in them again because they go, now these people really know, you know, not to make the same mistakes again. So it's really challenging to answer that question, because part of innovation and entrepreneurship is failing. And so to penalize somebody they might have learned quite a lot out of a failure is perhaps not such a great idea. So I'm not sure if I ever want to make that prediction. In fact, I'll just digress slightly here. Because I teach at the university, we used to say we sort of have to try and tell students what are the best ideas to write business plans on. And then people came to me with ideas around music and music production and game design and even artistic pursuits. And you know what, I'm just not equipped to answer that question if that's a good question or not. So our whole approach has been flipped to who is your customers and what does your customers say. So that approach, I kind of go, well, you know, is there a market? That's my first question, and that's, I think, the things to measure, how quickly people find a market and how big that market is, and if they find there's not a market, do they adapt? And that might be another study in its own. So I don't think that we necessarily will take these personas in the risk space, but I do think that we will get more data if we kind of collect stuff over time.
Yes. Yes, Terry.
Just as an observation, Retha, it's not a question for me, and it's not something that I want to do, but I would see a great business opportunity now for someone to say, I'm going to start a business that helps people change personas. I'm going to learn about these personas, and if an entrepreneur wants to shift their lifestyle, their business, or their intent, I'm going to use these models as a basis and do a training program or workshop around that to help entrepreneurs move through the ecosystem on the Sunshine Coast. So there you go. So I don't want to do it, but someone else might.
No. It strikes me that inflating the idea towards notions of the value that these persona generate and who are the beneficiaries, the audiences, the markets for that value, to see it as a dynamic. You could say, not only will I develop as a persona, move from one to another, but I discover a different market which I have to serve, and therefore I have to be in a different place.
Yes, absolutely.
It's less ego-driven, more market-driven.
Yeah.
So just as a follow-up to that, I think you kind of answered the question, Terry. Like, what is the practical aspect of this? I'm sure there's value in it. Thank you for these. It's interesting. But then, what will we use it for?
All right.
Probably one of that.
So the question is about practical value and what's the use of this?
So the issue is that these people who are in Support Central, and as you may be aware, the government's really spending a lot of money in many different regions on supporting innovation and developing innovative capacity. There's a lot of support programs, there's a lot of grants available out there. Like the federal government claimed to be spending $1.1 billion on this whole process. It's happening in many different states. Advanced Queensland is kind of our initiative, but there's things happening in New South Wales all around the country. So the issue is that heaps of money is being spent on entrepreneurial development or capacity development, yet do people who are spending the money know who they are talking to? Do they know what motivates those people? Do they know how those people make decisions? So using a persona approach is saying, understand if you're the old Ambo, for example, let's just try that as a services Sam, who are you talking to of these personas? You may not be going after the kind of entrepreneurial Evan Ava, but which of these personas are kind of creative industry personas, if I can ask that. And then you know who you are talking to. So your whole messaging is a lot more humanized than pushing generic content out there that doesn't necessarily speak to anyone. So in the first place, it's really valuable to understand who your customers are from a communication perspective. And there's many different co-working spaces around the place. Are they all after the same people, or are they actually offering different value offerings? So this is fundamental. If you understand your customer and you understand what they want and what their needs are, and on each of these we've mapped their needs. If you go around the place, you'll see that. Then you know how to tailor your value offering to what they're actually needing. So if, for example, a particular co-working space was going after mothers that are sort of starting something on the side or potentially an online business, then offering them office hours from 8 to 5 is probably like not a very valuable offering, right? They want to be offering them things, flexi kind of things, networking events, times when things are on, when they might not have any caring kind of responsibilities. So from that perspective, that's really valuable. And then on the other hand, if the old AMBO, the Innovation Centre, Spark Bureau, the Council, the Regional Development Australia, that all support entrepreneurs are using these personas, they can go, oh yeah, this guy is like a Been There Bobby. And they're all speaking the same language. So suddenly, Been There Bobby is code for what that is, and we don't need to explain a whole lot of stuff because we're all kind of sharing the same reference of who it is that we're talking about, what do they do, what do they bring, what do they want, and how they might be contributing towards the whole ecosystem. So that's sort of where I can see the benefit from this perspective, and the money that's being spent already, how do we make sure we're spending it well and it's targeted to the people out there that what do they really need and what do they care about?
I can see potential in this for gamification too. I can see little action figures, you know, that you actually put together in different configurations, and you ask yourself, well, what might come about if we were to put these people together and resource them in terms of what then plays out in that scenario building.
Yeah, that's
around
right.
this.
That's the next stage. It's actually a friend of mine just sent something to me that apparently Aus Industry has done, where they've used this approach exactly because they were looking for their specific programs and who was engaged and who wasn't engaged, and they've built different scenarios around that, like who would be reacting to this, how would they react, and who would not be engaged, and how do we get these people who are not engaged to engage in this program. So, yep, more work to be done.
That's a great researcher always finishes the research with that line. More research is required. Have you noticed? One last one from Ali.
In terms of the supportive network for entrepreneurs, I'm just wondering whether you've considered creating something like Tinder for entrepreneurship, where you match people up with the right support people based on their profiles. Yeah.
If you know how to do that, let's talk.
Like
yeah, who do you
thinking.
match with? Great.
Yes.
My name is Eric. When I came to the Sunshine Coast to live 3 years ago, I've come from South Africa. I lived in Southern Africa all my life. And I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, and I applied for several jobs. And of course, in your resume, first thing people look at is your date of birth, and they say, old fart, don't want him. So you sort of feel that, you know, you're not getting anywhere. So in the end, I thought, I have to start doing something. I dislike the word passion. I think it's overworked, but maybe you can weave it into what I'm going to say. But I found that I really love writing, and I really love the language, and so I started doing online proofreading and editing. I've only got a minuscule customer base, but it is slowly working out, and I'm doing other things on the side. But what I found coming from South Africa was that my options in South Africa were doing this. They were going down to a pinpoint of nothing. And although I knew a lot of people, they were of no use to me. I came to Australia, specifically the Sunshine Coast, and from just being little me looking around, you know, gee, this is, I love this, beautiful. Big thing I miss from Southern Africa, the iconic wild animals, but not going to do about that. And I found that it's a fresh start. I can actually start my life again. At the age of 70, I was starting my life again, and it's a wonderful feeling. And so I'm building this little business. I need to have an income stream because I don't get any benefits. But I also see that these personas, or personae, I probably slot in with about half a dozen of them. But another area that I've found difficulty is finding support, finding out things. And people say, oh, you just do this, that, and the other. And I find myself going into all these dead ends. So I create workarounds for myself, which is a lot of work. And everybody says, oh, but it's all there, it's all there. I don't know how to find it. And that's my big problem. I don't know how to find the kind of assistance that I possibly need.
When you're talking about, so for the record, it's an anecdote about coming to Australia and having a sense that there are opportunities, but feeling blocked in finding information to pursue those opportunities, or information and input. Can I ask what information you're looking for? Is it business advice? Is it domain-specific advice?
Ways to approach different organisations with what I do, and with what skills I can bring to the table. That kind of thing. And for example, I wanted to approach the Sunshine Coast University to let them know about the proofreading and editing that I do, because I believe there may be a lot of mature students, people doing doctorates and that kind of thing, master's degrees, who may have theses that need assistance with them. And I work in tenders, so I know what deadlines are. So I want to get into that sort of niche, but I sent out this rash of emails. I got one reply, which was a bit disheartening. I was mentioning it to Retha earlier. But I keep finding ways to work around these things, and slowly, very, very slowly, people are starting to recognise my name, recognise my logo, and associate what I hope is a personable person with what I can do.
Okay. Any comment, Rita?
So what you're saying is really valid. It's one of the things that came out really, like I said before, under the new to the Sunshine Coast type things. And the issue is that sometimes if you don't know what to ask for, you don't know what the right word is to use, you know, people don't understand what you need. So that's really that translating what it is that you need into the local lingo. It can be quite a challenge. There is a project going on around this. I know that for the moment they're talking about what we can do to address this. When it will be tested for the first time and so on, I'm not sure. But I know that what was one of the key recommendations that we said, if this is really to be a growing, thriving area where we're getting new people coming in with different kind of expertise and I guess human capital into the area, how do we get them connected? You know, that's an idea that's floating around the powers that be and people who have some money to do something about that. So I guess it won't help your case, but the idea is that it should be developing over the next 2 or so years.
The jargon word that's being thrown around a lot is concierge services, that this Advancing Regional Innovation Program will be providing concierge introductory services, a bit like the sort of matchmaking Tinder for entrepreneurs that we're talking about. Who do I need to meet? The people in the first place. Who is it that I need to know?
I do feel a sense of opportunity here, which I won't say I have a sense of helplessness, but it looked like a narrowing tunnel rather than a widening one.
Yes.
And over here, the light is not a train coming towards me.
Yes.
Hopefully it's the sun rising.
Yeah, well done. What you're doing too, mate. That's a big move.
Yeah.
What you're doing, congratulations.
Yeah, indeed.
Big move, mate. Well
Yeah,
done.
you have to, you can't.
Some people don't, and I'm congratulating you.
Thank you.
Yes. I think that is a persona, and it's a 50 and older, and this is a phenomenon as the boomers come through, and we're able to afford old age less and less. Self-employment does become an option. Hopefully Rita stays around for a little bit now. If you'd like to buttonhole her on anything that she's actually brought up, you can see that she's very personable and eloquent. This is a free event and part of an occasional series, as I mentioned, staffed by volunteers who surround us at the moment, and I'm very grateful for their input. One way you can support the AMBO is to buy a drink or two before you leave. We'll stay open and current for the next half hour or so. Thank you very much for coming, and will you please join with me in thanking Dr. Scheepers.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And thank you.